Miami is on a last-minute shopping spree in the spring portal. Is it building depth or showing desperation? Why the wins aren't what they seem. And when it comes to wins, Vegas thinks Alabama, Georgia, and Texas will do the most of it in the SEC this season. But our analysts think one is definitely going under that 9.5 win total. Find out which team they pick. Plus, one of the top quarterbacks in the 2026 class is officially off the board. So what happens with the only 5-star QB available? Our guys break down the quarterback domino effect, all that and more as the ultimate college football show starts right now. Welcome into the ultimate college football show. He is Cooper Patagna, national recruiting, scouting, portal, draft, college football analyst, does it all here. I am Emily Proud, and we are looking forward to bringing you an absolutely loaded show. It might be mid-May, but man, we still have a lot to talk about. What are you looking forward to most?
Our guy, Brad Crawford, joining the show, as always. SEC win totals. There are a lot of these that are pretty volatile, and I'm excited. South Carolina, we get to talk about his Gamecocks, LSU as well, so we'll see. I'm excited to talk about that.
A peek behind the curtain, our desks are next to each other, so I kind of have been hearing the wins and the losses, and I think some of your win total picks,
workshopping it a little bit.
They're going to surprise you, so we'll get to that in a bit. But first, let's start things off with the opening kick. It is deadline day for the House Settlement. Judge Claudia Wilkin requested adjustments be made by today or else she would not approve it. Specifically, she is requesting to grandfather current athletes into the proposed roster limits. Here's Brandon Marcello with more.
Well, the NCAA's got to reach a compromise here, and my understanding is that they will in some sort. Will the judge be willing to accept it? That's going to be interesting because the whole case hinges on this. The NCAA's idea right now is that the players who have already left teams, well, they can be returned to their current teams, but the school has to decide whether to accept them. Meanwhile, those players, if they still have current eligibility remaining, they can go elsewhere without counting against roster limits for another school. That's kind of an interesting, iffy situation just because other schools might not be willing to add other players and spend that money. Meanwhile, the plaintiffs argue, hey, we're willing to just accept anybody. They can stay at their school. They should be welcomed back to their current school, but the issue there is do these schools actually kind of have the space and have they budgeted out for this? Again, we're in the 11th hour of this. This has to come to a head here the next several days. Wednesday night is the deadline for them to submit their proposal to the judge, and the judge will review it, and then she will decide whether to finally approve this House settlement that's been discussed for so long and usher in a new era for college athletics starting July 1, where players will start being paid by the schools themselves.
Based on what we've heard from college football coaches and general managers, a lot of them have just assumed that they had to get under this 105 scholarship limit. But now you hear from Brandon Marcello saying, well, maybe they don't have to. So now they're going to call back some of those players. How does this adjust roster building right now with all these unknowns?
I'm not sure if it does because you said it. I think a lot of these teams have been under the assumption that they would have to operate under that 105 number. So I think for them, they have made the appropriate actions and steps that they've taken over spring, giving these guys the opportunity to enter the transfer portal and really kind of lean out their rosters. So I find it fascinating. I think any GM right now is just looking for a little bit of finality to be able to kind of put this in the rearview mirror, especially. I mean, we're kind of getting late in the offseason. We're in May now. You're past spring ball. You want to get your roster set. The portal window is behind you. I don't think a lot of teams are looking to make moves. I think they just kind of want the stamp of approval of which way can we go, and if there is going to be a resolution, what's it going to look like in the short term? How can we help our team really this year if there is a window to do that?
Yeah, they are eventually going to get to that 105 roster limit. They're just saying we shouldn't do it immediately because then players are going to lose their spot, but they already have.
A lot of conversations that should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah. It's fun that we get to do that now when the roster building season, it feels like, is already over. But that's going to be something interesting to track. There's some other off-the-field news as it pertains to college sports in general. According to a report from Yahoo, President Trump is planning to create a presidential commission to study college sports. College sports leaders have long been lobbying for congressional help, and this is really the first step towards finding solutions for the many, I'll underline many, issues facing this industry. I feel like his face tells it all there. Let's get into some ball, though. We're talking football here on the Ultimate College Football Show, and our friend Matt Zenitz had a very interesting tweet that we wanted to discuss here. He wrote that Miami has now landed 7 transfers in the last 11 days. This tweet is from yesterday. 2 experienced defensive backs, an All-American kick returner. Texas' starting kicker for the last 3 years. He's making it sound like this is all really good, and Miami fans are, of course, very excited about all the new additions. But, Coop, how should they view this spring portal haul?
It is good. It's a reason to be optimistic if you're Miami. It's just different. That's all that it is. That's the way that I would label it. And what I mean by that is we talked about those 7 additions that Matt was alluding to there. To get those guys in the spring portal is not often something that you see from contenders. And you're talking about Mario Cristobal going into year 4. If there's 7 players that you need to add, a lot of these guys are going to add depth, but they're going to add competitive depth. They're going to be asked to come in without a spring under their belt and compete for a starting role. I mean, you think about some of these guys, Keelan Marion, that was a really big addition for a receiving core that is missing out on a lot of production now off to Sundays. Tony Johnson as well, they bring over from Cincinnati. Jacoby Thomas was an absolute need that they had to have at safety. Kamal Bonner, another one of those guys that's going to be expected to play and step right in. And then Shamar Brown, who they bring over from North Dakota State, is a guy that solves a big piece of the puzzle for them as their third running back behind Jordan Lyle and Mark Fletcher. And then they pick up Keontae Scott last night, and then they add a kicker in Bert Auburn from Texas as well. These are all guys that have the opportunity to play a significant role. It's just a little bit of an outlier for a team that won 10 wins last season to be addressing all these needs in the spring portal. In the same vein, I'm the same guy heaping a lot of praise on LSU, who has the number 1 transfer portal class in the country. They have the same number of commits as Miami does in 18. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's interesting the fact that when you're looking for starting caliber players in the spring portal window, it's a lot more difficult, and the number is a lot higher for how much you're going to pay, and it's not something that I think you can continue to live with. And if you do it 1 year, great. If you do it year over year over year, it becomes a little bit more volatile of an equation that you have to work out. So I'm going to be fascinated at some point to see, like, when is the development there in Miami of all these highly touted recruiting classes take place. And I think it's one more year that Mario's kind of kicking the can down the road, and we'll see what happens. But credit to them. They've now positioned this 2025 team to compete head-to-head with Clemson and the rest of the ACC to win that conference.
So where's maybe the worry that they're having to fill a lot of these holes in the spring when you go and you look at what potentially they're going to do this fall? I mean, is there any worry when you think about that? The
worry is the lack of continuity. You have a new defensive coordinator, right? And now all of a sudden you're bringing in all these new bodies, new secondary coaches as Will Harris comes in, right? And this is kind of the 11th hour that you're trying to throw this all together, and they're throwing a lot of numbers in that defensive back room. They've done a good job with the talent identification and talent acquisition. They are bringing the right people in there. It's just a lot to bring together very quickly when you have the type of expectations that Miami has. All I'm saying is if you do it 1 year, I think that's okay. If you get in the habit of doing this year after year after year, it could catch up to you, and I think that's the thing that I'm pointing out here.
Exactly. And you mentioned, too, that this is something that we don't typically see from contending teams to put this many resources and bring in this many players during the spring transfer portal window. We'll talk about some of the teams that have been very active. One of those is West Virginia, and our friend Josh Pate sat down with the head coach, Rich Rod.
We're going to have probably 70, 75 new players.
That's insane. That number used to take 2 or 3 years to do that.
Yeah, and so you're building the culture, you're building a system's got to happen on speed dial. You're speed dating now in recruiting. I mean, it's not, you don't have 2 or 3 years to build a relationship. You might have 2 or 3 days. You know, that's what's so crazy about it now. But if you want to win, you got to adapt to where it is.
I mean, 75. You mentioned how challenging it's going to be for some of the Miami personnel to get just the 7 players that they got up to speed. But when you have that many players, what's the challenge in getting them ready to go for year one?
Well, I think when you're bringing in that quantity of players, it's really difficult for them to come in and get acclimated to a new environment. Also, the standard of the culture, right? It's not just an on-field thing; it's an off-field thing. And you have a first-year head coach, which you could make the argument maybe it's better for Rich Rodriguez, maybe it's better for Bill Belichick and Barry Odom to say, you know what, let's just completely wipe the slate, get in 75 new players in here, and set the tone with these guys. And these are going to be the guys that really kind of set the precedent for how this program is going to operate. But it is a challenge, right? It's a lot of new faces, and it's an unfamiliar spot for a lot of these guys that go into a new program and they don't know what to expect. And Coach Rodriguez said it right there. I mean, it's speed dating, right? Mm-hmm. So even though that you might like the physical makeup of the player, there's a lot of things that each side, both the player and the program and the coaches that they represent, don't know about each other, right? They're going to, and they don't have that time in the spring to really get acclimated with one another. So you're going to see a lot of volatility, and that's what it is. And, you know, I was talking to somebody at 24/7 today who covers the West Virginia site, and he said, you know, West Virginia fans are just, it's hard for them to really kind of compartmentalize the number of players that West Virginia has taken in. And they want to know, is this going to be the new norm? I don't think it is. I think a couple years ago when Deion Sanders did this, we all raised our eyebrows and said, never again. Yeah. Now here it is, and Rich Rodriguez is doing it, Barry Odom's doing it, Bill Belichick's doing it. Nobody bats an eye. It's just another year. So I think for first-year head coaches that want to be competitive and don't want to start with a 4-8 season or a 3-9 season, they want to try to compete right out of the gates for bowl eligibility. This is what you're going to see them do. They're going to strip it to the studs, and they're going to take as many hacks as possible. Eric DaCosta, general manager for the Baltimore Ravens, talked about this. It's all about how many at-bats you get at the plate. And when you're taking 75 guys, you're getting – those are your at-bats, not somebody else's. So at the end of the day, I think that's really kind of what it comes down to.
I'll ask you to pick just a couple or one out of the 75. You don't need to give me an analysis of all of them, but anybody stand out to you with this haul in general?
Yeah, I think a good bit of people. I'll go with Jamori Robinson, who they added in the winter cycle. Had 10.5 sacks last season, the edge rusher out of Texas San Antonio. Did a phenomenal job. That was a nice pickup. They pair him with Eddie Kelly, who they brought over from Missouri. Missouri, really talented pass rusher room. So you think about what West Virginia is doing in year one. Now it's about elevating the size and athleticism and overall talent composition of your roster. And you look at West Virginia, they've taken guys from every level imaginable, from the power forward to the group of 5. They took a receiver from Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, just this week. So they're trying to find guys that fit their profile, and I admire them for it. And I'm kind of putting these teams in that bucket, like the league pass teams, like who are the teams that are kind of out there doing some interesting things. West Virginia is one of those teams that I'm going to want to watch this fall.
One of the first-year head coaches, you mentioned Barry Odom at Purdue, 51 players coming in. It's no 75, but it's still a lot. So what stands out for Purdue?
Well, another team that's volume shooting, and I think you look at Barry Odom, the job that he's done at UNLV. I think they're another team that's very comparable to West Virginia, and they add a pass rusher that I like a lot in Miles Mitchell out of Monmouth, a guy that had a really good year, Terrell Green out of Eastern Kentucky. And I want to talk a little bit about him for a second. Here's a guy that started 13 games as a freshman at EKU. A lot of people might be looking over that. But this is where Purdue and West Virginia need to operate in year one, because now you get a guy with valuable starting experience as a freshman that has multiple years of eligibility, and that's what you want. So year 2, year 3, you're going to have a guy that's going to be a stalwart and a guy that you can rely on as a foundational piece in your organization. So you really have to exploit where everybody else might be overlooking in the transfer portal market. And I think Purdue, West Virginia have done a tremendous job trying to find guys with multi-year upside. Nitro Tuggle, another former highly touted top 247 receiver, signed with Georgia, didn't work out there. Now he goes back home to Indiana. That's another guy that's going to have multiple years under his belt. Those are the type of at-bats and the type of swings that I'm talking about that could pay off big time for Purdue and teams like West Virginia down the line.
Another school that we've talked plenty about in this offseason, North Carolina, not so much on what's happening from the personnel side, but more so with their head coach. So let's dig a little bit deeper into what they have done so far, what stands out.
I like what they've done, and I give Mike Lombardi a lot of credit. I didn't know what it was going to look like. Let's start with the quarterback, Gio Lopez, right? And that was a guy that I think a lot of people were maybe a little bit surprised by, that North Carolina, that was the player that they targeted. I mean, we heard some rumors about John Mateer. They took a big swing there. We thought Nico Iamaleava was going to be in play. And they just kind of laid up here. And what I mean by that, this is a single or double. They weren't trying to hit the home run in the first inning of the ball game there. And Gio Lopez is a guy that elevates the floor of North Carolina's program. He's going to be a guy that has experience, that also gives him multi-year eligibility as well, and a guy that makes him competitive from day one. Another guy that they add, DeAndre Robertson, who I like a lot, played a good bit of ball for Florida this last year, big body on the interior. They add him with Isaiah Johnson from Arizona. They've done some really, really intriguing things. They added Gregory Smith from Florida today. So you look at North Carolina, this is a team that has a look and feel of a Bill Belichick that has a NFL-type pedigree. They know what they want, and it's a little bit of like the land of misfit toys. But they're going to have new opportunity here in Chapel Hill. Fran Brown's doing the same thing up at Syracuse. So I'm excited to see how competitive this team can be. But hat tip to them. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch this season.
You saw the way that he built a lot of those Super Bowl teams at like the island of misfit toys. I feel like is a great way of describing it, because it might not have been all the star-studded players outside of Tom Brady and Gronk, but it's still pieced together with a lot of great talent. So I'm interested to see how that all works out on the field. We are just getting started here on the Ultimate College Football Show. Hit that like button if you have not already, and get excited because we are on the road to 1 billion views. We are getting really close. It doesn't sound close when I say that we're less than 10 million away, but trust me, that is very close to hitting that 1 billion view mark. So all you got to do, you're watching us right now, so thank you for helping us get there, but go and tell your friends. And in honor of our pursuit, we are also holding a giveaway. We're giving out yearly VIP subscriptions. To enter, take a photo of you watching 24/7 Sports on YouTube, share it using the hashtag Road to 1 billion. I hear we've already given out a couple of them. You could be a winner and not know it, so check your DMs. Also, if you have any ultimate burning questions, go ahead and drop them in the YouTube chat right now. We will answer them at the end of the show. We have a special guest for ultimate burning questions, so you definitely want to throw some in there. We'd love to answer them. It's time now for our recruiting spotlight, and you probably saw this earlier this week on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. The number 4 quarterback in 2026 is off the board. Jared Curtis committing to Georgia on Monday, and there will inevitably be a domino effect to his pledge, which our guys will get into in a sec. But first, let's hear from the top player in the state of Tennessee as to why he picked the Dogs.
I would say my relationship with Coach Bobo and Coach Smart, it's just different. I feel like it's just the biggest family atmosphere out of both schools, and I'm grateful for it. And obviously I had a really good connection with Oregon's coaches as well, but Georgia, I feel like Georgia got it done for sure.
How difficult was this for you down the stretch? I mean, there was a lot of chatter about, oh, he was a commit to Georgia, then Oregon took the lead. What was this last week or 2 weeks like for you behind the scenes?
It was a little stressful, but I got over it, and we got through it, so I'm excited to be where we're at and focus on high school now.
When you told your family last night and you let them know, A, how did you let them know, and then B, what was their reaction?
I just sent in the family group message, wear Georgia things tomorrow, and I told my dad right before I sent it to secretly record, and my mom broke into tears and she started crying.
Well, there you have it. Top 247 quarterback Jared Curtis committed to Georgia on Monday. We know there's going to be some QB dominoes falling after that. And the man I need to talk to right now is 24/7 Sports national analyst Brandon Huffman, because there is a guy out west that all eyes are on. Tell me the latest on 5-star quarterback Ryder Lyons.
Yeah, well, the latest is that he's still determining 2 of his 5 remaining visits that he's going to take. He's already got visits set up for Oregon, USC, and BYU for the month of June. He was going to kind of whittle it down between Michigan and Ohio State. Obviously, Michigan got a quarterback, Ohio State. And the thing that makes it so intriguing about Ryder Lyons is that he is technically a 2027 recruit. So even with Jared Curtis's decision to go to Georgia, with Oregon ramping up, he's still a year away from there. With USC flipping Jonas Williams, he's still a year away from going going there. BYU has a quarterback in this class in Cannell Sweetwine. He's still a year away. So he doesn't really impact the 2026 rankings, or I'm sorry, the 2026 class, but he certainly affects the 2026 rankings. And right now, here he is, the highest rated uncommitted quarterback in the 2026 class. And we still may be another 6 to 7 weeks away from a decision from Ryder, but he's also said he could do it at any time. So we're playing the waiting game. Is it going to be at any time, or is it going to be after those visits are done?
As soon as Curtis committed to Georgia, all the Oregon fans got fired up. Do you think that's a little premature? You were the first person to really hype up BYU and talk about how real they are as a threat. My crystal ball is on USC. I mean, are Oregon fans a little premature getting excited right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there was a time where him and Oregon weren't even talking. And then Oregon kind of got back into it when Jonas Williams flipped from Oregon to USC, and largely because of his decision at that point to push his enrollment back to 2027. But it wasn't like Oregon has been out in front for a long time. They have not been. They've ramped it up because of their need for a quarterback in 2026. But again, he's not enrolling until 2027. So he's almost a year out from really impacting what that class could look like. They'll probably still need a 2026 quarterback, especially with Jaron Kelvin Slongapolatelli being the second quarterback they brought in and then transferring to Cal. So with Lions, I still will not ignore what BYU's presence in this is. He is LDS. He is serving a one-year LDS mission. Remember, USC too, his brother is still at USC. So there's still that connection with the Trojans. I have felt for the longest time that BYU is the biggest threat to kind of ramp it up what everybody thinks is an Oregon or USC battle. I'm not ignoring what BYU is doing in this recruitment.
And no question, BYU is going to have the best NIL offer and opportunity on the table for Ryder Lions. Lions, one of the best in California. Let's stay in California and talk about Mark Bowman, the number one tight end in the 2026 class. What's the latest on him?
Yeah, it seems like all eyes are pointing towards Texas with Mark Bowman. I was at Mater Dei on Monday morning as part of their national championship trophy presentation. And Johnny Nansen, Texas defensive coordinator, who has recruited the West Coast for Texas, for Arizona, for USC, UCLA, Washington. He was there at 7 a.m. at that practice. Now, granted, he is the co-DC, not the tight ends coach, but you can bet with his connections in Southern California, he wanted to make sure that he got that FaceTime with Bowman. Texas is still there. Obviously, Georgia has been a factor in his recruitment for a long time. USC is also continuing to recruit him. They have had some success in the last couple of months with Mater Dei after a little bit of a dry spell for, what many people thought was the biggest pipeline in Southern California, Mater Dei to USC. Oregon kind of threw a wrench in that over the last few years, but with Tom flipping from Oregon to USC, and now the Trojans continuing to push for Mark Bowman, you can't ignore what they do, especially with Southern California, Chad Bowden's arrival at USC. There's a renewed emphasis in Californians, but right now it's looking like Texas could be the team to beat for Bowman. And keep in mind, they already have a Mater Dei tight end on the roster right now in Spencer Shannon, who Bowman replaced.
I too like Texas. I think they're the team to beat, but man, USC, that new juice, that new energy, they are surging. Let's move on to Spring Valley, California. Mount Miguel, top 247 athlete, two-way guy, Brandon Arrington, fresh off that Penn State visit. How do you see this one unfolding?
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, it felt like he was going to Texas A&M. It felt like the Aggies were way out in front. He had taken a number of visits during the season, during last summer, and it looked like Texas A&M was kind of the team to beat. He's narrowed it down to 5 schools. You got Alabama, Texas A&M, Penn State, Oregon, and USC. The one wild card in all this is the track aspect. Arrington is the fastest player in the state of California, the 100 and 200 meter champion in 2024 when he was a sophomore. Will probably win it again as a junior. Oregon has had a really good, successful run of getting those two sports standouts. But right now, Texas A&M still significantly a factor here, but Penn State, he had that visit there. And obviously the Nittany Lions have made a big impression there. But again, you cannot ignore USC. There has been a renewed ramp up of pursuit of him since Bowden's arrival. And again, there tends to be a little bit of a, kind of a positive peer pressure. When you start to see a lot of the guys from your backyard committing to one school, and that school just happens to be in your backyard, then that sometimes makes them even more attractive than they would have been before. But this one does not look as much like a Texas A&M lock as it did months ago. The Aggies are still a factor, but these official hits are going to be significant for Brandon Arrington.
If USC can win some games this fall, it is going to be very interesting on the recruiting front. But let's leave California. Let's head to Fruitland, Idaho, and get the latest on top 247 offensive tackle Kelvin Obot. I know you're the man to know about this one.
Yeah, I made the trip out to Fruitland last week on a Monday. It's right on the Oregon and Idaho border on the Idaho side. And OVA just the week before had named a Final Five of Nebraska, Michigan, Oregon, USC, and Utah. When I had gone to the school, he had just gotten back the day before from USC. He was there for the Trojan Olympics. But the number one player in Idaho got offers from all over the country. And so he whittled it down to those 5 schools. He went to Michigan. That's the only place he hasn't been for a regular game, but he went there for a spring practice, raved about the time. He was at a visit for Nebraska for their junior day, went to a game there. Oregon, he's been to a game. He's been there for a visit. Utah is a little bit of a wild card here, and here's why. His head coach at Fruitland High School is Jordan Gross, who was an All-American for the Utes, a top 10 pick, and a multiple-year Pro Bowler, played over 10 years in the NFL. For the Carolina Panthers, he played at Utah. And so the Utes have long been a factor there. And I wouldn't call them just a school that's in his top 5. I think they're a legitimate threat for him. Oregon has also continued to recruit him. Oregon has had great success in Idaho in back-to-back years, signing Kenyon Sadiq and Gatlin Bear, who are the number 1 players in the state. And then USC again, having that impact of him on that unofficial visit. I have a feeling that he is going to stay out west, and I think it's going to be USC, Utah, or Oregon that are going to be the 3 he focuses on. But he did love the Michigan visit, and keep in mind, there was just the number 1 draft pick out of the first round from the state of Idaho in Colston Loveland just a couple weeks ago.
All right, let's head back to California and talk about Mark Bowman's teammate. We got 4-star edge rusher, linebacker, Sean Scott. This recruitment, we've reported on USC 24/7 Sports how interesting this has gotten over the last couple of weeks. Do you think USC can get this done when it comes to Sean Scott?
I think so. And I think that they kind of just weathered the storm a little bit. They just kind of let him do his thing where he was visiting schools. Now, Mater Dei and USC didn't necessarily hit it off the other day when Caden Dixon-Wyatt announced for Ohio State, despite having USC in his final 6. But again, with Tom flipping from Oregon to USC, there's one defensive lineman there. Sean Scott playing in that front 7. I know his good friend and teammate Nasir Wyatt signed with Oregon. Oregon had been a factor there, but right now it's trending back towards the Trojans. And again, could we be seeing that pipeline reestablishing with Mater Dei and with the Trojans? Sean Scott could make it another player in the 2026 class. And again, one of the things that the players have been saying is that USC has said the best players in California stay home and play at USC. They have made that a huge emphasis and point of emphasis this offseason. And Sean Scott could be the next Californian to stay home and play for the Trojans.
I couldn't agree more. I like USC to get that one done. Huff, you are the man, as always, the guy to know out west. I appreciate you. Emily, back to you in the studio.
Appreciate Tom and Huff breaking that down for us. Shuggles in the chat wants to know what's new with me. What's new is we're doing a live college football show right now. That's all that's new in my world.
Good question there. Yeah.
That is a fantastic question. No, we appreciate you guys hopping in the chat. And if you have like some big picture questions, we'd love to answer them. Ultimate burning questions, as we like to call them. My burning question is with Ryder Lyons. This is somebody that we've talked extensively about, obviously, with his pedigree and being one of the top arms in this 2026 class. But now I feel like the spotlight is on him. We're seeing some of these other quarterback dominoes fall. So what do you find interesting about how Jared Curtis affects what could happen with Lions?
Well, I think Oregon was the other big player, right, with Jared Curtis, so we'll see what happens with them. And I think Oregon has done a really good job under Dan Lanning, Will Stein, their offensive coordinator, really kind of getting the pick of the litter in terms of quarterbacks. You see the job that they've done in recent years, getting Dante Moore back in the fold via the transfer portal, Austin Novosad. They had Jaron Kiave, Sagapulitele locked up until he transferred back to Cal, and then Achilles Smith Jr. So all that to say that I think Oregon is in a pretty interesting spot where they are the next domino to fall, right? Whether that's going to be Ryder Lyons, whether it could be a guy like Landon Duckworth down in the Southeast that maybe they turn their attention to. But I think Ryder Lyons, the attachment there with BYU is really fascinating. I mean, we're talking about somebody that's going to go on a mission his first year at college, so he won't play. And I think BYU makes a lot of sense because his play style really reminds me a lot of Zach Wilson. This is a guy that's very comfortable being uncomfortable. He loves playing off script, off platform. That's kind of his game. And if you're Kalani Sitake, you know, they're not really a team that's in the recruiting spotlight a lot. But this is a guy that is a really good fit on both sides. It's a good fit for Ryder Lyons as well. So I think if you're BYU, you could see them sinking their teeth into a guy like Ryder Lyons. And we've seen what their basketball operation is capable of on the NIL front as well. So BYU's not going to be one of those teams that's going to be outbid in this rare case in a head-to-head against Oregon. maybe they do have the better offer. And that's not to say that if Dan Lanning and Phil Knight really wanted to get this done from a financial standpoint,
they'll find a way.
They'll find a way to do that. But I think Oregon is more in a position to say, hey, if this doesn't end up working out with Ryder Lions, there's plenty of fish left in the sea. And they're also in a position to say, you know what, we're just going to sit back, let the market kind of matriculate, and we'll see what this looks like in October. And maybe there's some late rising, late developing players that rise up our board that we have an eye on right now. And not a lot of programs get that luxury. Yeah. Oregon is one of those teams with a Moore and a Novosad. They probably have their starter for the next 2 years. So I don't expect them to be in any rush. I think they're going to take a hack at Lions, and if it works out, great. If not, I think they're in a fine position. But I really like the idea of Ryder Lions and Provo.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic point, too, about Oregon, is I'm sure Oregon fans, after missing out on Jared Curtis earlier this week, might be feeling the heat a little bit, but to know that there's patience. We've seen late risers, like DJ Lagway is a fantastic example of what he was able to do his senior year. So it's only May. There's still time for
early.
it. But the BYU element is definitely going to be interesting to follow there. Hey, if you want more recruiting talk and personnel and everything you need to know about college football, make sure that you are listening to the 105 podcast. Coop and Andrew Ivins actually talked about one Ryder Lions and everything happening surrounding him today. So make sure you are locked in and listen wherever you get your podcasts. Let's transition back to current college football news. When South Carolina landed the number 2 transfer running back in Rasul Faison, they felt confident he would be granted an eligibility waiver to play this fall. Well, Shane Beamer has an answer as for if it's been granted yet.
No, and it's getting frustrating, just to be completely frank. I understand the NCAA has a lot on their plate, Hale, but the fact that they've had everything that they needed from us since January and we don't have an answer is frankly disappointing. We've given them everything they needed back in January. They asked for more. We gave them what they needed. They asked for more. We gave them what they needed. We've been in contact with other schools that he was at to get stuff from them that they needed. And, again, I know they have a lot on their plate, but the fact that we're now in the middle of May and we still don't have an answer, and we just went through a portal window where we didn't add a running back, but we don't have an answer on whether or not we're going to have, what would it be, 3 scholarship running backs on our team, or 4 or 5, whatever it is. And that's tough when you start talking about planning for 2025. So to answer your question, no, and it's getting frustrating.
Watching that in studio, let's welcome in Brad Crawford. Brad, I kind of joked to Coop. I said he's holding back a lot right now. I wouldn't be surprised if once the camera's turned off, he turned around and punched that wall. It is extremely disappointing, as he said. It's frustrating, but we want to bring you on here just real quick. Tell us what's the latest that you're hearing?
It's a sticky situation right now in Columbia with a running back they signed in January that they thought would be their running back 1. Now, right now, he has not been granted his 6th year of eligibility. They are trying for that. Rasul Faison today actually hired Darren Heitner, lawyer out of South Florida, who specializes in these NCAA type cases, to represent him. And that is a good move by Faison and the University of South Carolina. Shane Beamer, if Faison is not eligible this fall, that leaves South Carolina with 3 scholarship running backs. They're going to be extremely thin at that position, do not have a starter like Faison, who had 1,100 yards last year. So right now, the argument for the Gamecocks with the NCAA is Faison signed with Marshall in 2019, and that's kind of the sticking point here that started his 5-year clock. And players have 5 years to play for. He didn't play at Marshall and then did not play at Lackawanna Community College the following year. Last 2 years he played at Utah State, and that's where he should be a redshirt senior in 2025.
This guy is one of the most dynamic players in the entire transfer portal, and you start to get really, really excited if you're a South Carolina fan, and you think about the idea of Lenoris Sellers and Rasul Faison and how they can attack you in so many different ways on the ground. And the other point that I want to allude to is what Shane Beamer said. They sat pat during the spring portal. They didn't add another running back. So this is potentially a potential big issue for South Carolina. And Brad said it. I don't think people realize having 3 running backs is very, very thin. 3 scholarship guys that you can rely on. Typically, that number in that room is 5 or 6 that you want. So they are not at full capacity right now, especially with a guy like Rasul Faison that can do so many different things. I mean, he is poetic and as gifted as a runner that there is in the transfer portal. He's a huge addition to South Carolina, and one of the reasons I think a lot of people were buying stock in South Carolina this year. So if they can't get him on the field in the fall, it's going to be a huge hit.
Yeah, I watched Faison play 2 weeks ago in the South Carolina spring game, a scrimmage that was not televised. And you could tell early in that game, he only played 4 or 5 series, but he's not only going to be used as a running back option for the Gamecocks, but he is a receiving threat out of the backfield, caught several screens, moved the change for Lenora Sellers in that first team offense. So, Coop, to your point, if Faison is not ruled eligible, they are extremely thin in the backfield, and there's a reason that Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks did not go with a 5th portal running back this spring, because they thought Faison, by this point in mid-May, would be deemed eligible.
I read they could consider moving a DB to running back who he played in high school, and so all options are definitely on the table. But the best option is that he does get granted his waiver, and as you said at the beginning of the segment, he has hired a lawyer to help out with that. So we'll continue to track it. But I just want to say, guys, it's never too early to start talking about win totals. So let's go ahead and talk about some with the SEC. We picked 6 that our guys could maybe have a little bit of debate over. So while we're on the subject of South Carolina, I know they're not the lowest on this list, but let's just go ahead. 7.5. Brad, I'll start with you. Over, under?
Yeah, I'm going under this time around. You know, I think the Gamecocks losing 3 second-round picks off of defense, 5 total starters lost off Clayton White's unit. That's going to be troublesome for South Carolina. First couple weeks of the season, probably 3-0, and then that Missouri game. That is a huge road game for South Carolina. Probably the difference, in my opinion, between a 7-5 type 8-4 finish, which is right where that win total sits at. The game against Alabama in October at home is one of the defining moments for Shane Beamer's 2025 season. If the Gamecocks win that game, I do think they could be in the playoff conversation like they were last fall.
Brad, I'm shocked, I got to say. I thought for sure you were going to take the over here. I think for South Carolina, I think the key lies the first 5 games of the season. You look at the first 5 that you mentioned. Virginia Tech, that's a big one. South Carolina State, no issues there. Vandy, at Mizzou, Kentucky, right? Those are the games that really kind of stand out to me. Can you start 5-0, and then that gives you a little bit of grace? And you mentioned you got Alabama at home. I think that's a big one. And I think the other part here is Rasul Faison that we talked about. What about this receiving core as well? You're missing a lot on defense, but time for guys like Dylan Stewart to step up. They added some pieces in the portal. This is a team that's really capable. This is a huge year for Shane Beamer, especially coming off the year that they had last year. Now you get to really kind of cement your status in the SEC as a legitimate contender. I think Lenora Sellers is a real deal. We're talking about a day one type of talent, and this is going to be a guy that I think sky's the limit, can only get better and better and better. But for South Carolina to win more than 7.5 games, Lenora Sellers is going to have to take the next step, and it's going to have to be more of that Superman heroic type of effort. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm riding Lenora Sellers all the way to the end.
Okay, see, I told you we were going to have some disagreement. We do it on the very first team. I feel like I should point out, too, South Carolina won 9 games last year despite their over-under win total being 5.5. So they have
still very shook that Brad took the under there.
I know. We're like, got to reevaluate for the rest of the segment here. Let's go back to Oklahoma. 6.5 is what we have for them. I'll let you start here. Over under.
I'm going to go with the over. I'm actually really confident in Oklahoma. And how about this? I'm gonna give these guys a 5-0 start. You get Michigan at home, freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood. That's where you want him. Michigan typically just gets better as the season wears on. I love John Mateer. I love what they've done. Jaden Ott, I think the offensive line is going to be good enough. They put enough pieces around Mateer on the perimeter with what they've done at the receiver position. And then defensively, I think they're going to be stout as well. I think that Texas game, that's kind of the pinnacle of the season with how good of a season this can be for Oklahoma. And then that second half of the season, it's brutal. But I think Mateer and Oklahoma is going to be a team that not a lot of people are going to want to play. This is going to be a tough out for Alabama. It's going to be a tough out for LSU, who they get at home in Norman. I think this could be an 8, potentially even 9-win team. I'm going over here for the Sooners.
Yeah, I'm siding with Coop. I think 6.5 for a projected win total based on this roster gathered through the portal is extremely low. I would set the total somewhere around 7.5 for Oklahoma. I think Brent Venables bounces back here in year 4 from that 6-win season last year. And the first 3 games of the season are very important. Illinois State's a win, and then Michigan. We're going to know if John Mateer can play in the SEC when Michigan comes to Norman. Huge game. Week 3 is obviously a win, too, and then you've got Auburn, the SEC home opener. So I think Oklahoma has a legitimate shot at starting 4-0. They would be top 10 with wins over Michigan and Auburn in that aspect, and I do think that they're going to be better from a consistency standpoint at the quarterback spot. Mateer is a huge signing. He's a top 5 SEC quarterback, in my opinion. And then post-spring, they got Jaden Ott, a guy that had 1,300 yards 2 years ago at Cal. So you've got quarterback, running back combo that is one of the SEC's best. And at times last season, the Sooners had trouble moving the football on the ground, and especially through the air. They had some turnover issues, had 5 or 6 against South Carolina in that home loss. So Oklahoma is definitely one of my SEC bounce-back teams this season. And 6.5 over is one of my favorite preseason bets. Oklahoma, like Coop said, probably wins 8 or 9.
I like it. I'll speak for all of Oklahoma fans. They better win more than 6 games this season. That is an absolute necessity for the Sooners. Another team that could potentially bounce back, Florida. They also have a 6.5 win total. Brad, over under here.
Yeah, I think Florida gets over 6.5, but it's somewhere in that maybe 8-4 range. DJ Lagway, his shoulder's okay, according to Billy Napier. First couple weeks of the season are wins, and then it just really starts. In Baton Rouge for the SEC opener, both teams. This is low-key one of the SEC's best rivalries, too, by the way. Back when it was East versus West, it was always a great annual game. The teams hate each other. And I do think that the winner of that early season, Week 3 Florida-LSU game, kind of makes its stance toward the early playoff conversation. So Florida's a team that certainly gets over 6.5 wins. I don't have Florida in the playoff, but 8-4 or so, then Billy Napier's on good footing in game.
I'm going to go over it. I'm going to smash it. I think this team is a 9-win, 10-win team here if DJ Lagway is healthy. We talked about the inactivity in the portal. That means that there is a high level of confidence in what they're bringing back, especially on that offensive line. And if you can get a clean bill of health out of guys like Trey Wilson, too, that's going to help a lot. So I like what Florida's doing. This all comes down to quarterback play. And when we saw DJ Lagway last year, this was a completely different team with him in the lineup. I think he's going to take another step. Hopefully him not participating, not throwing in the spring, sets him back. But I think Florida in a really good position there. 2 cupcakes. I don't want to call South Florida a cupcake, with all due respect. But 2 games that are easily winnable before they have to travel to Death Valley in the 3rd week of the season. After that, you get Texas and Georgia at home. I think they win both of those games. That's probably where the difference is, Brad, between you and I on the schedule. And I think Florida is going to take the next step out of that kind of middle-of-the-pack SEC and into 9-10 wins.
Yeah, Brad, what do you think about that? I was sitting next to Coop today, and he was like, yeah, Long Island win, yeah, Texas win, Georgia win, and some of those things are not like the other. What do you think about sweeping Georgia and Texas?
That would be insane for Billy Napier. Go ahead and sign him to a lifetime deal, at the Swamp. The key is DJ Lagway. Is he one of the best quarterbacks in the country? If he shows that as a true sophomore this fall, I could certainly see Florida winning 10 games. The issue for me is the defense. They lost some key guys there. Jake Pyburn to LSU. He's going to be one of the Tigers' best edge rushers. Florida needed that. But I do like some of the freshman talent at wideout Florida signed. Some of those guys really starting the spring game, and Lagway has plenty of weapons around him. Oh, by the way, the Gators' offensive line is probably the best in the ACC with Jake Slaughter back. So Florida's a team I don't see winning 10, but certainly hits over that 6.5.
Yeah, I think the neutralizer for me is the experience. It's going to be one of the more experienced teams. And then you think about Texas. I think there are a lot of changing pieces on that offensive line. They're going to get tested, especially the right tackle spot. It's a big question mark for me and Brandon Baker. So it's going to be a game earlier in the season. I think they can be effective enough in impacting Arch Manning and making him uncomfortable. And then with Georgia, how do you feel about Georgia just in terms of how you view them last year? How high is the ceiling with a guy like Gunnar Stockton at the helm? And this is, like I said, it comes down to DJ Lagway, but I think Florida's a team right now that's playing confident football. And can they carry over the momentum that they had last year? Getting these 2 at home, Texas and Georgia, are going to be marquee games for not only DJ Lagway in Florida, but for Billy Napier, maybe the 2 biggest games in his career up to this point. If they can win those, who knows where Florida is by the time we're talking about whether or not they beat Texas and UGA.
You mentioned that momentum, 4 straight wins to close out the season. So they are on a win streak right now, if you can carry over a win streak season to season, currently having a lot of success. If you would be so kind, please hit that like button. We do appreciate it. It helps us out, helps spread the show, and more the merrier in this group chat right now. We're having some fun. We have research stats that are going out if you want to see some of those. And then, of course, some fun, friendly debate between people. But everybody agrees with what you guys are saying, so I just want to make sure you know that. Let's talk about Auburn. 7.5 is their win total. I'll start with you, Coop. What do you think, over, under?
I think this is one of the more volatile ones out there, and it completely hinges, just like on every other one, their quarterback play. And what do they get out of Jackson Arnold? So I'm going to go under here, right? And Jackson Arnold is one of those guys you got to dig deep into the tape to kind of find the flashes of what you like. You watched the Temple game, one of the first ones of the season. You said, all right, I see it with Jackson Arnold, the former 5-star. The Houston game, things start to break down late. And then the Tennessee game, everything just kind of fell off very quickly. And then outside of that, he had some bounce-back performances, played well against Ole Miss. Auburn has done everything right in terms of high school recruiting over the last 3 years under Hugh Freeze. You think about what they've done in the transfer portal as well. They go out, they get one of the best, if not the best pass catcher in the entire portal, and Eric Singleton, Xavier Chaplin, Mason Murphy on the offensive line. They bring over Horatio Fields, Caleb Wheatland on defense. I mean, their roster is really, really good. The quarterback play is going to have to be suboptimal for them not to win more than 7 games here. And I think for Hugh Freeze and Jackson Arnold, this was the biggest part of the equation for them this offseason was what direction are we going to go at quarterback? And if it's not Jackson Arnold, then it's Ashton Daniels, a guy that had a lot of peaks and valleys last year at Stanford. And if it's not him, it's Deuce Knight, a guy that we love from a talent standpoint. And even with the rave reviews in the spring, might not be ready yet. And that's a lot to ask in a critical year for Auburn. Not to mention, like, you got Baylor week 1. And if that doesn't go your way, which I would say at this point, that's going to be a really good game, then all of a sudden you're starting behind the 8 ball a little bit. And the next SEC game that you have is on the road against Norman, and Norman against Oklahoma. So I'm going to go under on Auburn. And all of that is tied back to Jackson Arnold. And if he plays just okay, this could be an 8 or 9 win team. So it could really swing either direction.
Yeah, I don't speak for Auburn fans here, but they don't want to see 3 quarterbacks play in September. That would be a bad omen, and it would be much of what we saw last fall. If Hugh Freeze does go under this win total, he's probably fired on the Plains. He has to get over 7 wins, and I think he does. The schedule's tough, but we have not seen the best football of Jackson Arnold's career. He is a former 5-star signee at Oklahoma for a reason. I think he has the talent in that arm to get it done. We mentioned all the portal acquisitions that Auburn brought in to surround him with talent. They've got Cam Coleman back, too. He's one of the best freshman 5-star wide receivers out there on the Plains. I think Auburn has some home games that are winnable. Missouri's a big one, and they've got to win the swing games. At Baylor, as Coop said, is huge with Sawyer Robertson versus Jackson Arnold in week 1. That's low-key one of the best opening weekend games that probably will show us a lot of what each of those teams, one from the Big 12, one from the SEC, have in common this season.
Yeah, I think completely sets the tone for that conversation from a win total standpoint for Auburn as well. The other thing is you study Jackson Arnold. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. First full season as a starter. That was a really tough situation there, from the lack of offensive line to the lack of play calling to the lack of perimeter talent. He steps into Auburn, and it's the exact opposite. Really good offensive line, elite talent out on the perimeter, good running back situation, and you got Hugh Freeze as your play caller, who I know over the last couple of years has been subject to a lot of criticism, but this should be an advantageous situation for him. But he's got to take another step, and the big thing with him is confidence. And if his confidence is shaky out of the gate, it could take a while to get back. So he's got to play well early.
A Baylor game on a Friday night, too, so mark your calendars, starting a little bit early with a gift, I will say, with that game. All right, we're going to beef up the win totals right now a little bit and go to the teams that are picked to have the most wins. And let's start with Alabama. 9.5 for the Crimson Tide. Year 2, Kalen DeBoer, over, under. Brad, what say you?
I took some flack this time last year when I had Alabama out of my preseason playoff projection. This season, I have Bama in. Kalen DeBoer is going to have a bounce-back year. I think Alabama will be better suited in the passing game as a whole with Ty Simpson back there. and I really like what they have on defense. I have power ranked the secondaries of the SEC. Bama is number one to me. Xavier Brown, Damani Jackson, two future first-round picks at each corner spot. You've got LT Overton, former A&M pass rusher, to lead the D-line. And the Bama schedule, I think, sets up for success. First 3 weeks of the season, there's some seesaw game, but Bama should be 3-0. And then you play at Georgia, followed by 2 winnable games. And then the November schedule there is LSU, Oklahoma, and then Auburn at the end. So we're going to know down the stretch if Bama's a playoff team or not. I'm going over here. 10-2 is my preseason prediction for Alabama's final record, and I do think DeBoer and the Crimson Tide get to the college football playoff in year 2.
Yeah, huge year for Kalen DeBoer in Tuscaloosa. I'm going to go under. I'm going to go with 9 wins here for Alabama. And, I mean, we're talking about one game, right? But really where it starts with me, on the road in Athens against Georgia, I think that's going to be a get-right game for Kirby Smart earlier in the season, going to set the tone. And then at South Carolina. I'm obviously a little bit higher on South Carolina than Brad is, but Lenore Sellers at home, that's going to be a really, really tough game, that environment. And then you got LSU. We're going to talk about LSU. A lot of us really, really high on LSU and the type of talent that they have on that team. But even outside of that, there's some games here. Oklahoma, Auburn, talented team. Vandy, right? We have Barton Simmons on this show. Vandy is a tough team that beat Alabama last year. And then you have to go on the road against a really testy Mizzou. It's not just those games. There are a lot of different traps here that Alabama that could fall into. And Brad said it. Alabama is one of those teams where the ceiling is really high, but I don't know what this looks like at the quarterback position and what type of consistency we're going to see. And if it's not good enough, do we turn the reins over to a Keelan Russell? I could see a year kind of like Florida last year where all of a sudden it's Graham Mertz and it's okay and we're trying to navigate through it. Then it's the young freshman that comes in and kind of ignites a fire. So 9 wins can look a lot of different ways, and I know Alabama fans are chomping at the bit to get back into the playoff conversation. But if it's Keelan Russell at the end of the year and then you have a finish where you can build some momentum and build around a young franchise cornerstone in Keelan Russell, I think 9 wins, even despite it being a disappointment, is something that Kalen DeBoer can sell and that you can be excited about. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if Ty Simpson is not the guy to elevate them in these marquee matchups, then I wouldn't be surprised if they turn over the keys to one of the more talented players that we've seen in the last couple of years.
I mean, can you imagine Kalen DeBoer losing to Vanderbilt for a second consecutive season?
And at home,
and this time at Bryant-Denny, that would be like pitchforks galore in Tuscaloosa. I don't see Alabama losing some of these 50-50 games that maybe they lost last season. That 3-touchdown loss in Norman last November was an embarrassment for the program. I think Bama does bounce back and probably lays a crooked number against Oklahoma this time around.
Yeah, I like the way that you phrased it with the hope at the end of the year if you play Keelan Russell, because devil's advocate, Alabama won 9 games last year, and I think it's safe to say fans were not happy about that, but different circumstance potentially when it comes to them. Georgia also with a 9.5 win total. Start with you, over under.
I'm gonna go over for the Dogs, and I think this is a team that's really having some difficulty kind of navigating the NIL space, but they're doing a better job, and it all comes down to the big uglies in the 2 guys that they have in the middle that they love, C.J. Allen, Raylan Wilson. They got some young pups, Chris Cole, Justin Williams. There's some guys that are ready to step up in a big way for the Georgia Bulldogs. In the quarterback position, right, we continue to talk about that. Ty Simpson, Gunnar Stockton, I think 2 of the bigger question marks in the SEC. What's that going to look like for 2 of the conference's biggest contenders, and can they get enough out of the receiver position? They bring over Zach Branch from USC. They bring over Noah Thomas, a guy that I love, out of Texas A&M. So what's it going to look like for Georgia? Not to mention Elo Medozi. They needed some depth and some DPR ability off the edge. They get him in the spring portal from West Point. So I like the moves that Kirby Smart has made. And all of a sudden, this is kind of feeling like a must-win year for Kirby Smart in terms of getting back to where Georgia fans expect them to be. I think a 10-2 season, I think a CFP appearance as well. That's what's on the horizon for UGA.
That's where I have Georgia too, 10-2, and actually my last team in my early projected playoff. I think that Gunnar Stockton may not be a long-term answer at quarterback. I don't think he's the playmaker that Kirby Smart really needs at that position, but he does give you, the sort of bridge gap ability this fall with that defense you mentioned, Coop. We expect elite play out of Kirby Smart's defensive unit, and there are games on this schedule that Georgia can win just by showing up defensively. You look at the game at Tennessee, that's a very big early season game. You know, Kirby Smart's probably licking his chops to face a Tennessee offense that does not have Nico Iamaleava as the quarterback. The game at Auburn, that is one that I have on upset alert in the middle of the season. It's been a long time since Auburn has beaten Georgia. Hugh Freeze on that hot seat on the Plains. That would be a kind of a statement win for Hugh Freeze if Auburn's able to knock off Georgia midway through the season.
See, I would argue that Georgia would be more excited to see Nico based on what happened last year. They seemed to contain him just fine during that game. But yeah, that's an early season test there.
Spoken like a true Tennessee fan.
I mean, I did have to point that out. I think that they had some success against him, but yeah, we'll see what happens there with Georgia. I'm going to throw a surprise team at you because I'm always just keeping tabs on what you guys are saying on social media, and we had an interesting post here on X from our friend Brad Crawford about LSU. He said, I'm considering going all in on LSU as my preseason everything this summer. Coaches around the SEC know Tigers are absolutely loaded everywhere. Doubles down, he said, I am talking natty. We already know they are CFP bound. So I do need to ask our man in studio here, who might have a vested interest in what happens with the Tigers this year. What do you think about that? Natty.
I twist my arm. I'm right there with him. I think they're one of the more talented teams in the country. I think the biggest question mark that I have about LSU is how do you replace Will Campbell and how do you replace Emory Jones? Now, here's the thing. I think people look at Will Campbell, top 5 pick, Emory Jones, a guy that went in the first top 100 picks, and they think, well, they should have been able to establish the line of scrimmage last year and run the ball consistently. They were not able to do that. They had 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line drafted, and this was a team that could not run the ball consistently. So you look at LSU, what they do. They go out, they get Braylon Moore out of Virginia Tech, he'll start at center. Then they get Josh Thompson, one of the best interior offensive linemen in all the portal, he'll start at left guard. DJ Chester goes out to right guard. But who's at tackle? And you have guys like Weston Davis probably going to start at the right side and then Tyree Adams on the left. Very talented guys that we liked out of high school, but they haven't played a lot. And who do they face week 1? Arguably the best defensive front in all of college football, and Clemson and Peter Woods and TJ Parker and Will Helt. They're coming, right? And Tom Allen's a new defensive coordinator over there. So how does LSU start this season? They've lost every opener under Brian Kelly. It's been incredibly frustrating. It's giving us incredible memes over the last couple of years. But LSU has to win that game in Death Valley, and it's going to be really, really tough because I want to see LSU with the wind at their back and having some confidence going into the season. And then, listen, we have a lot of expectations about this team. But if they lose to Clemson, they have Louisiana Tech week 2. And then who comes to Baton Rouge? Florida, who I'm really high on, that I have as a 9 or 10 win team in DJ Lagway. So their margin of error is super, super thin. This is a super capable team, but like Miami and some of these other contenders, they're heavily reliant upon that number 1 transfer portal class where they took in 18 kids, and a lot of those guys were there in the spring, but they got to gel quick. And for them not to have a complete layup in the opener, that Clemson game is going to be huge because the rest of their schedule is pretty tough. I can completely get behind LSU as a national title contender. They have to help themselves, and this is going to be a really, really difficult path for them to get there. And if they can get through week 1 unscathed, I think that's really going to be one of the biggest hurdles for them.
Brad, what prompted you to post that?
So the good news for LSU is college football playoff national titles are not won in week 1. LSU will lose an opener for the 7th straight year and still be okay, I think. Just get to the dance, a la Ohio State last year. Lost their biggest game of the year. Lost both of them, actually. Lost at Oregon and then lost to Michigan. Still ran the gauntlet and won it all. I think LSU can do the same. I've already got Garrett Nussmeier as my top returning quarterback in college football. I think he'll be the number 1 pick in the 2026 NFL draft. And I spoke to an SEC coach last week. I won't say any names publicly, but he just raved about every position group LSU has coming back, especially the defensive line with the 2 new additions in the portal. You've got Whit Weeks. He called him the best inside linebacker returning in college football. That's high praise. And normally we're talking about LSU's defense being an Achilles heel. Well, now you've got a great passing game. You got Berrien Brown, by the way. He might be a day 1 pick if he has a good year in Baton Rouge. So I'm all in on LSU. I'm not quite picking them to win it all just yet, but I do have them as one of my 4 SEC playoff teams.
This is without a doubt the most talented team that Brian Kelly's had, but like that's paper talk.
Yeah.
This is off-season talk.
Yeah.
I hear all this stuff. Oh, we're going to go beat up USC. We're going to play a physical brand of style. Shut up. Just go win a game. Go win a game. I'm sick of these dudes talking. And, quite honestly, they haven't talked all offseason, which is great. Just show up and go win a game maybe that you're supposed to win. They got Clemson week 1. I think Clemson's going to be one of the best teams in all of college football. But if you're Brian Kelly, this is it, dude. You got the whole NIL. You got everybody behind you. You went out. You got the guys that you needed to get. Now you got to put it together. And I've always believed in his coaching chops. I think he's one of the best in the country. Now he's got the talent. This is year 4. It's time to go. And they got to win the games that they're supposed to win. And if you're an LSU fan, they don't care where you're playing. Yeah. They expect to win Death Valley week 1. He's got to win that game. And if they don't win that, Brad, I'm with you. It's all about getting into the dance, but it's a mentality and a psychology for this team that they have completely lacked the last 3 years. They need to flip the script, much like Ohio State and Michigan. If this game is not the whole thing to them, then maybe they've been approaching it wrong for the last 3 years, and they got to make this one the one that they get and then ride out the rest of the season and see where it goes.
Yeah, drop that mic on LSU, man. You hit it right on the head. And it's sort of like last season. Last season, Ole Miss signed the top-ranked portal class, but it's Ole Miss. They don't have the rich tradition that LSU has. Last 3 coaches who have coached in Baton Rouge have won natties. Brian Kelly has not gotten to the playoff yet. So now it's year 4. There's as much pressure on Brian Kelly this year as there is in Brent Venables coming off a losing season, as there is Hugh Freeze losing season. And Brian Kelly won 10 games last year, but it's not enough. He left his baby, Notre Dame, for a reason, to win national championships with recruiting and top-ranked signing classes. Well, he has it now. He has a bunch of 5-stars. He has a bunch of guys in the portal that other SEC programs and Big Ten programs alike wanted. And he put his own money up as well, matching some of these NIL deals. So Brian Kelly knows this is the best roster he's had. And he has got to be a top 5 coach this season on game day, making decisions and sort of putting these pieces in the right place for LSU to be as good on the record as it is on paper.
Yeah, and starting week 1 is, I think, what Cooper's getting at. You seem a little worked up. I have a comment that might make you happy here.
Fired up, man. Give me a helmet now, please.
This is great. Elle from YouTube says, I got my 105 podcast fix on in the sauna today.
Oh.
So that's good. So you got listeners all over the place.
Kind of weird. Thank you.
Well,
hey, get it where you can.
Yeah. Listen,
thank
wherever
you
get your podcasts.
listening.
But yes, thank you, loyal listener there. All right. That was not a question, but we have been following along your questions. So let's answer some of those ultimate burning questions. This first one comes from X at Irish Forever. I wonder what this is going to be about. Thoughts on the announcement of a 12-game series between Clemson and Notre Dame. Brad, I'll let you take this first.
Sure. I think this is a win for both programs, but especially Notre Dame. When you're able to schedule elite programs like Clemson annually, they play USC annually, they've got a game this season against Texas A&M, they've played Miami in the past, why join a Power 4 conference? Notre Dame's already shown that the yellow brick road to a college football playoff berth is to win 10 games every year with an Irish schedule, and you're there. Marcus Freeman right now is sitting on a literal gold mine in South Bend because of these sort of planned events, so to speak, these planned games over the next few years. This is also a huge major ploy from the ACC to keep Clemson satisfied after they kind of settled that lawsuit, Clemson, Florida State, and the ACC. So now, once that grant of rights ends here in about 6 to 8 years, perhaps Clemson does not leave the ACC and stays in now that they've kind of given them a bone and they'll play Notre Dame every year.
I love it, Brad. And I think about it because where everybody's zigging and going into the transfer portal. I mean, we talked about teams that took 51 players in the transfer portal earlier today. Dabo Swinney and Marcus Freeman are really doing the exact opposite. It doesn't mean that both of them, crazy to say now, have shown an ability to both get involved in the portal and go get guys like Will Helt or Malachi Fields or whoever it may be. But these are teams that are traditionally built that are going to lean on their player development. And I love the way that they're built. And there's a lot of Marcus Freeman in Dabo Swinney, and vice versa. I think that's how I meant that. But, this is a rivalry that I would love to see. And the last couple times that we get to see these guys play head-to-head, some of them have led to blowouts, but I think Marcus Freeman has done a tremendous job elevating the talent composition of his roster. And I think this is great for college football because two of the biggest brands, two of the brands that we talk about the most in college football taking center stage.
Yeah, like Brad pointing out, it's kind of chess, not checkers. With the ACC's new agreement, potentially they're going to give more money to the teams who have more eyeballs, and there are going to be a lot of eyeballs on this game. Not starting, though, till 2027, so we got to wait a little bit, but then we get 12 years of it, so we'll be sick of it by the time it's over. This next one coming from Instagram, at CandaceB129. Does Ohio State have enough star power outside of Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs? What do you think, Coop?
Hell yeah. I mean, these guys are loaded every single year, you know? I mean, Mark Pantoni, one of the best in the business, what he does. And I get it. They might not be the names that people are typically used to seeing. And, you know, no Quinshaw Judkins, no Travion Henderson. But, you know, they go out, they get C.J. Donaldson. They got Carnell Tate. They have Brandon Innis. They get Max Clare out of the portal. Phillip Daniels from Minnesota. Aninwa from Rice. You know, you throw in Caleb Downs and some of the guys that they have, Bo Atkinson, who they add from the portal as well. So, yeah, without a doubt, this is going to be one of the most talented teams in the country. I didn't talk about the quarterback position. We don't know a lot about Julian Saint or Lincoln Kineholz, but teams around the country would love to have that quarterback situation. And sure, they're going to have to nurture it a little bit, either direction they go. One of those guys, if not both of them, are going to have to take a little bit of time and a little bit of development. But, yeah, Ohio State certainly has enough to get by.
I'm going to get all kind of mentions and DMs after the show for saying this, but I'm a little worried about the lack of star power at the two coordinator spots that were vacant. Brian Hartline got moved up from quarterbacks coach, wide receiver, to OC, Chip Kelly off to the NFL, and then you lose Jim Knowles because you refuse to meet his demands to Penn State, a rival you're going to play, and you replace him with Matt Patricia. You know, it's not really home run hires, in my opinion. Brian Hartline, notwithstanding, is very, very good recruiter, very good game day coach, but we have not seen him as an OC yet. Now, I know this is Ryan Day's offense. As Coop mentioned, they are littered with star power all over the field, but it's the two coordinators that I'm going to be looking at sort of the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, because we saw Chip Kelly get extremely hot as a play caller in the playoff, and that helped Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith connection a lot in the Rose Bowl against Oregon.
Wow, Matt Patricia, not a star. Shocking. No.
He used to be a star.
Yeah, he was former NFL head coach. Didn't go great with the Lions, but no, I think that's a legitimate
it's a
question
fair point.
there. Yes,
you skirted around it and made a very good point.
No, yes. Please let us know what the mentions look like, though. I feel like that'll be a fun one. So I said that I'm all over the internet and trying to pay attention to some things. So I have my own ultimate burning question. I say it's mine. I'm taking it from one of our colleagues. Clint Brewster posted this on X saying it's extremely tough to rank these quarterbacks going into the season. Manning, Nuss, Sellers, Lagway. How would you order it, Brad?
Garrett Nussmeier is my 2026 top draft pick, so I've got him 1, top quarterback in the country returning. Arch Manning 2. I know we haven't seen a ton of Arch, but I fully expect him to be in that Heisman conversation coming down the stretch for a very good Texas team this fall. Then I've got Lenora Sellers. Now, I might have elevated Sellers to 1 if I was a bit more confident in what South Carolina had around him coming back. Nick Harbor has to kind of emerge as that wide receiver 1 this season. And then I've got Lagway. We have talked about the Sellers-Lagway debate ad nauseum this offseason. And, man, I really wish the Gamecocks and Gators could just settle in on the field and play this season. But the only way we're going to see that matchup is if both get to Atlanta. So I've got Nussmeier at 1, Arch Manning 2, Lenora Sellers 3, and Lagway 4. But you can't go wrong with any of those 4 signal callers.
This is a great question, and one that kind of put my head in a little bit of a pickle. I think all 4 of these guys are first-round draft picks and top 10 picks too. These are all legit dudes, but I'm with Brad. I think Garrett Nussmeier at this point, number 1 pick in the draft. That's where I am on him. I think he would have gone first round this year. I think there are a lot of talent evaluators that love the idea of Garrett Nussmeier. If he can clean up some things from last year, I think he'll be in that conversation. I think DJ Lagway is one of those guys that, quite honestly, the more you see him on the field, the better that he is. And I know Brad and I had the conversation a little bit earlier, a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, about DJ Lagway maybe not matching the statistical production, but just the impact that this guy has on the field. We've seen it, and that's what I love about DJ Lagway and how he can help the Florida Gators. Arch Manning, I think this guy is 2 years away. I think he's going to be really, really good next year. But in terms of all the things that we're hearing about right now and how good he's going to be, I think it's going to be a little bit of a process. And I think there's going to be some cold water thrown on him. And I think some of that is going to have to do with the supporting cast as well, right? Texas is losing a lot. We'll see what the offensive line looks like. And then all in all, it's going to be a good thing for Arch Manning's development. And then at number 4, Lenora Sellers, who I think is going to be the guy that you'll hear a lot of Anthony Richardson player comparisons. You see the physical stature. You see his ability as a runner. I think from an intangible standpoint, there's a lot more to get excited about Lenora Sellers. And the things that I think right now maybe a little bit streaky as a passer, the decision-making, putting the ball on the ground a little bit too much for some people's liking. Good thing about all that, it's all coachable, right? It comes with experience. I think Lenora is going to take a big step this year as well. So really, really convicted in all 4 of these guys. I think they're all studs, and I don't say this lightly. I think they're all 4 guys that you can build a franchise around at the next level. So I know everybody's in wait-and-see mode and what this looks like, but I'm not taking anything away from all 4 of these guys because I think all 4 of them have the chance to be the faces of college football.
One of those
That's
questions.
extremely high praise, too.
Yeah.
I mean, coming from a former a personnel guy. And Sellers is so good off platform. He's great when plays break down. So many of his best highlights last season were on 3rd and long where they were in passing situations and he just shook off sacks. He rolled left, rolled right. He ran through cornerbacks, did it against ranked teams too, by the way. And then Nussmeier, we have put so much pressure on him this offseason as, I guess, one of college football's Heisman frontrunners at this point for LSU and being one of the top quarterbacks. But last season, Garrett Nussmeier against Lenora Sellers in Columbia, I think had Sellers not gotten hurt late in the second quarter of that game, maybe South Carolina beats LSU and makes the playoff at 10-2. So Gamecocks and Tigers is a game this season in Baton Rouge that I think both these staffs have circled, and we're going to sort of handicap this top 4 a little bit better once we see these 2 quarterbacks again in action.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those games, too, that they're going to clip off and show us again come draft time next year.
I was about to say.
As well.
That's going to be the game that you're going to hear everybody talking about, what it looked like head-to-head, who made the plays when it mattered.
Yep. It's one of those questions that's very interesting, but also not a great debate because I feel like both of you agree that you just would kind of agree with
really
any
good
direction. Yeah, all fantastic options. But that means that we're going to get some great quarterback play in college football this fall. I wish that it wasn't so far away, but today makes it a lot easier. Brad Crawford, thank you for being here with us. We are always here on Wednesdays and Mondays, the ultimate college football show. We appreciate you joining us today, and we'll see you back here next week.